Hi everyone, Chris from Stone Age Gamer here, and welcome back to Stone Age Countdown. Remakes! Everybody loves remakes, right? Who doesn't love seeing their favorite classic games reinvented and gussied up with fancy modern new technology? I know I do, even when they don't turn out so great, like Secret of Mana. But regardless, remakes have been around for a heck of a lot longer than a lot of people may realize. In fact, going all the way back to 16-bit systems like the Genesis and Super Nintendo, they were cranking out remakes back then too. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Here are my top 5 favorite 8 to 16-bit remakes. Now before we get started, let's lay down a couple of ground rules. What I'm talking about specifically today is direct ports from NES to a 16-bit system, where they took the NES game and made it 16-bit without changing it intrinsically on any deep kind of level. That means something like Excitebike Bun Bun Mario Battle and BS Zelda for Satellaview are disqualified because they're pretty different experiences overall from their NES counterparts. Ninja Gaiden Trilogy for Super NES is also off the list because we're talking about good games here, and that thing is, as the saying goes, if you don't have anything nice to say, best not to say anything at all. Anyway, let's get started. Number 5. Snake, Rattle, and Roll. Snake, Rattle, and Roll for NES is a spectacular game, and the wizards at Rare did a fantastic job of bending the NES to their will in ways that delivered some truly impressive graphics. Naturally, when the game was ported to the Mega Drive, the state of the source material meant that, in theory, this new version wouldn't really need much in terms of a visual boost. Fortunately, that turned out to be correct, as the Mega Drive version largely just uses more colorful versions of the original NES sprites, animations and all. There are a few cleaner edges in terms of colors too, which make the game look especially nice. And the one thing that holds this version back though is its music. For some reason, David Wise was commissioned to come up with a completely different soundtrack for this port, and while this game still sounds great, the tunes he came up with here are, at least to my ears, vastly inferior to the NES tracks. Still, this is a great, albeit bare bones, port of an NES classic. Number 4. Championship ProAm. Speaking of rare NES games on Sega 16-bit hardware, here we have Championship ProAm, a direct port of RC ProAm for NES. The NES original looked and sounded great for its time and still holds up remarkably well today in terms of just being an incredibly fun and engaging racing game. And the Genesis version, well, it doesn't change all that much, which surprisingly works even better here than it did in Snake, Rattle, and Roll. The visuals are super clean, and the game even seems to run a bit smoother. The one thing they did change was adding 2 additional cars to the races, which adds a nice extra layer of intensity to the gameplay. RC Pro-Am is great, and Championship Pro-Am for Genesis is about as good a port as anyone could have expected. Number 3. Mega Man: The Wily Wars. The first 3 NES Mega Man games are masterpieces, especially 2 and 3. They helped define what NES gaming was all about, and they play pitch perfect, again, especially 2 and 3. The one area where Mega Man's NES outings could stand to improve though, especially 1 and 2, is in the visuals department. So when Mega Man: The Wily Wars materialized on Sega Genesis, it looked like an absolute home run. Visually speaking, Wily Wars is super weird. Most of the enemy sprites are just recolored or cleaned up versions of the original NES versions, but the Robot Masters and Mega Man himself have all been redrawn, some better than others. The backgrounds are all really neat too, giving a fascinating sense of context to the stages that was missing in the NES releases. Where this compilation falters though is in terms of both music and basic gameplay. The music wasn't simply grabbed from the NES game and run through the Genesis instruments. The music was all redone from scratch, and it sounds bizarre. Some of it works, but a lot of it kinda doesn't. As far as gameplay, Mega Man shoots too slowly, and really, the whole game's speed seems really off. So with these flaws, how does it possibly make number 3 on this list? Because of Wily Tower. This bit of the game allows players to choose a weapon loadout from the first 3 games and tackle 3 all-new Robot Masters. Sure, it's no masterpiece, but it makes up for its flaws by having a heck of an interesting personality. Number 2. Tetris and Dr Mario. Tetris on the NES was a revelation. Not quite as big as the Game Boy version, obviously, but a massive success in its own right. Dr. Mario was Nintendo's own take on the falling block formula and found its own massive success as well. These 2 puzzlers were some of the best on the NES, so combining them into one single cart for the Super NES was something of a dream come true for fans. While not taking a ton of liberties with the visuals on the NES games, what they did here really looks spectacular, especially Dr. Mario. This background tile bit is so cool. The music came out particularly well in this collection too, including the Nutcracker tune from the NES being replaced by the Game Boy Tetris theme we all know and love. It is missing that super cool NES ending screen with all the Nintendo characters playing music and dancing, but it makes up for it by adding not just a two-player mode to Tetris, which was available in the Tengen release of Tetris but conspicuously missing from the NES one, but also throwing in Mixed Match, where players have to compete in both Tetris and Dr. Mario at the same time. It's incredibly fun, and one of the best puzzle collections out there. Number 1. Super Mario All-Stars. The 3 Super Mario Bros. Games on NES are about as close to video game royalty as you can get. They're all absolute icons and have stood the test of time in their original formats thanks to Nintendo being particularly good at pushing their own hardware to its limits. However, there's always room for improvement, right? Especially in terms of 8-bit games when stacked up next to 16-bit masterpieces. And thus, Super Mario All-Stars was born. This one really set the gold standard as far as how remakes should be handled, especially for its time. Taking these 3 NES classics and not just adding a 16-bit coat of paint, but thoughtfully redoing their visuals in ways that make them feel like genuine SNES-worthy games was no small feat. It can be argued that in some ways Super Mario Bros. 3 actually looks worse than the NES game, but even with that and the weird physics changes to Mario 1, the first 2 games in this collection look and sound incredibly cool. Like everything else on this list, All-Stars isn't perfect, but as an alternate take on these 3 games, it's far more successful than, say, Mega Man The Wily Wars. Plus, as far as I'm concerned, this is the only way to play the Lost Levels, as it not only makes the continue system more fair, but it allows you to play the hidden extra worlds without having to go through quite such an absurd gauntlet. Super Mario All-Stars is great, and easily earns its number 1 spot. So those are my top 5 8 to 16-bit remaster/remake picks. But I know that my knowledge is not absolute, and if there are other great 8 to 16-bit ports out there that I didn't mention in this video that should have been better than the ones that I listed, let me know, because, well, this stuff I've always found fascinating. I know that there's a couple of games on the TurboGrafx 16, like Dragon's Curse, I think is what it was called, the remake of the Dragon's Trap, which was pretty decent, and of course there was Ninja Gaiden on TurboGrafx 16, which, ugh. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. If you liked what you saw here today, please follow, comment, like, and subscribe. And like I said, if you know of any games that should have been on this list that weren't, please let me know, because I am utterly fascinated by all this stuff. Thanks again for watching, everybody. On behalf of all of us here at Stone Age Gamer, keep playing games.